I'm James with Armchair Warlords, and this is segment 4 of our Pathfinder video series where we talk about how to get into the Pathfinder game and how to get the most from the gaming experience. This part discusses the ability score system and how to pick ability scores, how to distribute your points into your ability scores, and what impact they have on your character. So the first thing to do is to figure out how you're actually going to pick out your ability scores. This is going to be determined by your DM in most cases. DMs will either use a point-buy system wherein you get a certain number of points, and those points are used to buy upgrades to your attributes or your abilities. Another method is to roll d6 dice to determine random numbers for your ability scores. And another method is for the DM to simply give you 6 numbers and allow you to put those numbers wherever you want. So with the point buy system, the Pathfinder book actually explains the point buy system in chapter 1. In this table here on page 16, you can see that an ability score is given a fixed number of points, and you spend those points from your pool. It also gives you examples of point pools to start with. Low fantasy games have 10 points, for example. Standard fantasy is 15, high fantasy is 20, and epic fantasy is 25. The differences in these are obviously the more points you have, the more points you can spend in your ability scores, and the more powerful your characters will be when they're first starting the game. The standard fantasy distribution of 15 points is going to allow you to create a character who's slightly above average, and by average I mean your standard run-of-the-mill farming human. High fantasy is usually one of the more standard pools. That's going to allow you to create a character who stands out above and beyond your normal everyday person. Once you have those the point pool decided, you can spend the points however you want and put different scores into each of your 6 abilities. Now, with the dice rolling system, there are several different methods for that as well. The most common one is to roll 3d6. The second most common that I've seen is to roll 4d6 and drop the lowest number. This will typically result in slightly higher numbers. Instead of your average 8 to 12, you're going to end up with some 14s, maybe some 16s, and if you're really lucky, a couple of 18s. Typically, you're only going to see 1 18 on most characters, but they can actually go more highly distributed than that. It's all about how lucky you are at rolling. With the standard distribution system, the DM will assign 6 numbers. He'll say, alright, everyone has the following 6 numbers: 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10. You can put those numbers wherever you want, but you can't change the scores in any other way. After you've chosen those ability scores, though, the only other thing that can affect them is your races. Now, when you pick your race, which we discussed in segment 3, and is also discussed in chapter 2 of this book, they will have modifications obviously to your ability scores. Elves, for instance, will give you pluses, a +2 to intelligence, +2 to dexterity, and a -2 to constitution. Those bonuses and penalties are applied after you've gone through this entire segment of generating ability scores. Now, for the individual ability scores and what they're used for, the first one is strength. Strength is a measure of a character's raw physical power. This is how much weight he can lift, how much force he can deliver in a blow, how much he can carry, those type of things. Now, as far as game mechanics are concerned, your strength ability score is going to have a direct impact on your ability to land a blow with melee combat, the weapon damage bonus that you can apply to any hits that you score. It'll govern physical skills such as climbing, jumping, anything that relies on raw physical strength. So if you're interested in those types of activities, your character is going to be based around being able to do those things well. You want to make sure you have a high strength score. The typical classes that are going to be really concerned with strength are going to be your fighters, your barbarians, sometimes your rangers. Those people are going to want to hit hard and make sure that they hit often, because these are going to be your frontline warrior types. The next score is dexterity. Dexterity is a measure of your character's agility, his finesse, his grace, his reflexes, how quickly he responds to actions. As far as game mechanics are concerned, it's going to cover your ability to land ranged attacks with, say, a bow or a crossbow or a sling, anything that you're sending out over a distance and requires great hand-eye coordination. It's also going to add a bonus to your armor class, which is your character's ability to defend or deflect blows without taking any damage. Obviously, the higher the dexterity modifier, the higher the armor class, and the harder you are to hit. It's also going to add a bonus rather to your reflex save, which is your ability to reflexively dodge sudden occurrences such as a fireball going off next to your feet, or a rock falling off a cliff and heading towards you, or a trap being sprung and you trying to dodge it. It's also going to add a bonus to your initiative, which when you engage in combat, initiative determines which order that you act in. So the higher your initiative, the more often it is, or the more likely it is that you're going to be acting first in a combat round. So if you're a character that needs to hit first and hit hard, or that needs to be in front of, say, the spellcaster so that you can get your hits off before you have to soak or dodge those spells, you're going to want to make sure you have high initiative and therefore a high dexterity score. And also, it's going to add bonuses to all your ranger and rogue type skills, things that involve moving swiftly or dexterously, such as hiding, moving silently, acrobatics, tumbling, anything that is based on your character's ability to move with grace. The next score is Constitution. Constitution is a measure of your character's health and endurance, his physical stamina, and how much damage he can absorb, how much his body can take before he gives out. So in game mechanic terms, it's going to apply a bonus to your hit point roll every time you level up. So every time you level up, or any time your Constitution score changes and the modifier changes, you add or subtract hit points from your total hit point pool. So if you're a character who's going to be taking a lot of damage, such as a warrior or barbarian, you're going to want to make sure that you have a high Constitution score so that you can soak more damage and survive longer in battle. Also, it's going to apply a bonus to your Fortitude saving throw, which is the saving throw that's used when you're trying to resist a poison or trying to withstand some type of physical injury or anything that impacts your character suddenly in a physical way. And it's also going to be a measure of your survivability. So if your character gets knocked down, the higher your Constitution score, the longer you can survive in an unconscious state before you bleed out and die. So it gives characters or other members of your party more time to save your life. The next score is Intelligence. Intelligence is self-explanatory. It's a measure of your character's raw mental abilities. This will be very crucial in determining how many skill points your character gets to start the game with. Every class gets a different number, but every class gets to add their intelligence bonus onto that starting number. So the higher your intelligence, the wider array of skills your character can possess. Also, skills that are based on intelligence, such as your knowledge skills or spellcraft, are going to get a bonus from a higher intelligence score. So if you're a caster, such as a wizard, you're going to want to make sure that you have high intelligence scores to be able to make your character more powerful. And lastly, intelligence will affect how many languages your character can start the game with. If you're going to be exploring strange lands, it's a good idea to have a high intelligence in a broad number of languages. That way you're not walking around being confused by people who can't understand you. The next score is Wisdom. Wisdom is a measure of your character's willpower, his common sense, his awareness. It's really a pretty broad range of things that wisdom encompasses. It's not just a physical perceptive ability, but it's also mental and spiritual awareness of your environment. So in terms of game mechanics, wisdom will cover perceptive skills such as perception and sensing motive, whether or not someone's lying to you. And it's also going to apply a bonus to your will saving throw. Your will saving throw is your ability to resist mental influence or spiritual influence, things like enchantments or domination effects from vampires, that type of thing. So the higher your wisdom score is, the more you'll be able to resist anyone trying to take external control of your character. And the last ability is Charisma. Charisma is a measure of your character's personality, and in some cases, depending on your DM style, it could be also a measure of your character's physical attractiveness or appearance. strictly speaking, in game terms, that's not necessarily the case, but it can be depending upon the DM. Now, as far as game mechanics are concerned, charisma is going to cover social interactions. It's going to apply a bonus or a penalty based on your score to your roll to make initial impressions on people you've just met. It's also going to increase or decrease your conversational abilities, such as negotiating with people, trying to bluff your way past a guard, trying to perform with instruments or with song and dance, that type of thing, is going to be based on charisma. Now, another aspect to consider when you're picking your ability scores, if you're playing a casting character such as a cleric, a druid, a wizard, or a sorcerer, is that your spell casting ability is going to be based off one of these attributes or one of these abilities, and it's different for each class. So a cleric, for instance, is going to have his spell casting ability be based off his wisdom, because it's a measure of his willpower and his ability to interact with his deity. So if you're playing a cleric, you're going to want to make sure you have a high wisdom score. With wizards, it's based on intelligence, because it's a measure of how much they can memorize and how well they can put together spells and cast those in the midst of a combat. And with your sorcerer, it's going to be charisma, because it's based on his ability to interact and his ability to make quick decisions and to be spontaneous. There's another table in the book on page 17, which is ability modifiers and bonus spells. So if you're playing a caster, it's important to take a look at this table and see if you have a high enough score to warrant any bonus spells. What this will give you is a number of spells that you can cast per day in addition to your base allotment. So for instance, if you have an intelligence score of 16 and you're a wizard, you get one bonus level 1 spell every day. So you'll start the game being able to cast 3 level 0 spells and 2 level 1 spells every day as opposed to just one. And of course, this table is independent of the the ability score used for your class. So if you're a sorcerer with a 16, you still get the same +1 bonus. With classes that only have a limited number of spells in their repertoire, the bonus spells do not increase the total number of spells in your repertoire. They only increase the number of spells that you can use in a single day. It's important to remember when you're picking your abilities that your abilities start off with a raw score based on one of these generation methods, but then they're going to be adjusted by your race preference. Now, if you followed along with this tutorial, you should have already picked a race, and so you already know what those bonuses and penalties are going to be. And the next most important thing is to remember that you want to put each raw score number into the right category for what class you're playing. So if you're a fighting character, you're going to want to make sure you have high strength, high constitution. If you're a utilitarian character like a rogue or a ranger, you're going to want to make sure you have high dexterity and high intelligence. And if you're a caster, you want to make sure your high score is always in your casting ability, because casting is going to be your key thing. So you want to have the most effective character you can. You have the highest spell casting ability.